Hi all, and welcome to another tutorial here on unitycookie.com. And this is the third in the series for the LunarLander tutorial. And this one we'll be taking a look at how to get your player ship set up and moving around the level just fine. So a bit about working with rigid bodies and physics, some small bit with particles, and a lot about scripting. So especially for any beginners out there and such, don't worry, we'll take it nice and slow so it works, but not too slow, so we'll get through this in hopefully about 20 or 30 minutes, and you'll learn a lot about getting input from Unity and using it to affect anything with physics or other variables and such in your script. So to start, whether you have your first level up or anything like that, we'll want to create a separate level just to make sure we don't mess up anything in here. So file, new scene, of course, and then just save that as, we'll call this ship setup in this case. And then just bring your ship right in by dragging it from the project folder into the hierarchy. And once you have that, we can start adding on the particle effects right away. So those should be in the thrusters folder here in the project folder. And we have thruster underscore red for the bottom, and let's work with that one first, I guess, actually. We can pretty simply move this so it fits right onto the ship easily just by dropping it onto the game object for the ship here, and it will be become a child of it basically. And then if I go to the transform in the inspector and change each of these position variables to 0, x, y, and z, it's now centered right on it. So it's right where I want it. Then I can just rotate it, of course, so it's facing in the right direction. And then do something the same for each of the smaller thrusters, one on each side and one on the top. And we'll use the tiny thruster prefab over there in the project folder. Drag and drop that in just the same. Make it a child. Zero out its location. And then set it up just right. And don't forget you can hold down Control to move, to rotate it in nice little 15-degree increments. Makes it a lot easier to get it just right. Looks like I have that a little off. There we go. Oh, something's wrong there. If you notice for some reason your rotation gets off, you can always do the same sort of trick over in the rotation field. Just change everything back to 0, and then go ahead and re-rotate it. There we go. Okay. So once we have each of those set up just right, remember you can always hit Control D while it's selected and move it into place. And Control D will quickly and easily make a duplicate of it without having to do anything more complicated. So we have all of those in about the right place, something like that. Looks like I actually had a couple extra in here from a previous run of this tutorial. Try to ignore those, I'll just delete them out real quick here. Okay, much better, there we go. So you should have your main thruster on the bottom here. We'll actually rename that to thruster, or we'll say bottom thruster. And then before you start naming the left and right, make sure you're looking in the same view as your camera will be. So in that case, we can see right now this is shooting off to the left, so is this one. Sometimes it's easy to get flipped around and not notice that this is actually the back and this is the front or something. So just give it a quick check and make sure it looks correct there. So now we know this is the left thruster. Always good to name things just so it's especially once you have a lot of them going on and they might look a lot the same. Keeps it organized. Okay, so we have all three of those labeled, ready to go. You might notice sometimes if you drag and drop and move around pieces inside of a prefab, in this case our ship, it loses the connection, and this will change from blue to gray. Simple enough to reset it. Now in Unity 3.5, you can just hit apply over here, in the inspector, and now this is the prefab itself. So it's overrode it with these new settings. So good to have that. There's also a revert button if you want to go back to what the actual prefab is in case you've broken it and want to get back to that, or select will bring you directly to it in there. So show you it in the project folder, that is. Okay, so we have all our particles set up. Of course, we actually want them only to activate when the correct button is pressed. So if we go to each particle in the hierarchy and just, or actually we can select all 4 of them at once and just turn off the emit one time, very handy, so they're all off. See, on and off, simple as that. So we have our particles attached, and the non-emitting, so we can attach the script to it. So we can start working on a script for these, and to do that we will first of course just create a folder in the project area here. Again, keeping things nice and organized, call it scripts, and inside of that folder create a new JavaScript and call it player controller. And just taking a pretty basic look at what we get here. Oh, I'm sorry, you can just of course double click on that or hit enter if it's selected to open up your script editor. And your script editor might not look exactly like mine. I'm just using the Unisite, pretty basic Unity editor. Otherwise, if you have MonoDevelop or something else that opens up, don't worry, it'll all work exactly the same. It's just a matter of visual preference, really, so no big deal. So here we have, with Unity 3.5 now, automatically drops in this little pragma strict line at the top. And what this does, it's a very good thing. It just forces you to always, you could say it's just much stricter on your coding. So shortcuts you can normally take, it disallows and forces you to be a bit more careful with it, which is good because if you ever move on to Android or iOS programming especially, you can really break some things and have to go back and fix a lot if you weren't automatically typing in this mode. So this will generate more errors if you're typing sloppy than otherwise if they weren't there, but it's a good thing. It forces you to be careful about it. So pragma strict, make sure you leave that there. Then we have these 2 functions that Unity drops in automatically into the JavaScript file, function start and function update. And they drop these in because they're just the most commonly used functions. Function start simply happens as soon as this object is loaded up, becomes part of the scene, and function update is simply happening each and every single frame. So obviously a lot of things will end up in update because you want to keep track of various things, but the least you can have in there, the better, just for using CPU cycles and such. And I always, I just happen to like keeping my brackets aligned like this. Some people do it this way, but it looks better. Always seems a little neater to me in this way here. Okay, so what we need to do now is get the input to move this ship around and affect the thrusters, the particle thrusters and all that good stuff. So to do that, we need to get the vertical and horizontal input, and Unity makes this nice and easy. It already has vertical and horizontal set up for you, so we can just do input, and we're doing this in the update function, since of course every frame we want to check if a certain key is pressed down or not. So input.get axis, and we'll start with horizontal. So input.getAxis horizontal, and I actually want to make this, an if statement because we want to check for it if this is happening. So if, and then in parentheses input.getAxis horizontal, and we'll say is greater than 0. So that would mean we are pushing over to the right, I believe. And this is where it gets good to start commenting your code, so you can make sure you remember exactly what's happening. If you ever just do 2 forward slashes, you can type in a quick comment line. This won't affect the code in any way. It's just a way to remember exactly what this and that line is doing, which, especially if you're a pretty unorganized person like myself, or just tend to forget as you go, great way to remember exactly everything that's happening here. So we'll say checking for right input, or maybe just a right arrow key, and put 2 brackets. And inside of here, we'll do print. And what print will do is down in the bottom left here, and we can open this up further also once the game is running, it can print off, as it sounds, statements or info or anything you might want. So we can check exactly if this is working. So we'll say print got right key. So we've got the right arrow key, and then we'll need to get the left. So pretty much the exact copy of this except an opposite for the input. So I'm going to copy that, paste it down here, and say if it is less than 0, change my comment to left, and the print to left. And once we have this here, we can hit Control S to save, just to test this out real quick and make sure nothing's broken yet. And if nothing shows up in the bottom bar here, that means it compiled, it's okay, and we can drop it right onto the ship just by dragging it, of course, from the project folder in the hierarchy onto the hierarchy, the ship here. And now you'll see in its components we have the player controller script. So if we hit play, just to test to make sure everything is working so far. Oops. Let's remove that rigid body if you have one on there. We don't want it to be falling or moving affected by physics yet. Okay, so we have it play, and if I hold the right key, sure enough, shows up, and the left key shows up. And if we click on this, it'll open up a larger console, and you can see just as we have it set, every frame it's checking for exactly which key is being pressed. So that works well. Now we just need to get the up and down arrow keys. So again, pretty much a copy of this. Just paste this back down. Oops, there we go. And we'll do the up. So changing my comment and changing the print to up. And the same for the comment on the down. And then instead of the horizontal axis, we're now checking the vertical axis. Save it and give it a check. I find it always helps to check often, especially if it's your first time coding, or if you're like me and again you just tend to forget how things are working a lot. And just keep checking while you're working, so you know there's less stuff that could have broken since the last time you hit save and opened it in the editor. Sometimes if you write pages of code and you want to know exactly what broke, it can be a little tricky. Looks like though for now we have up, down, left, right keys working just fine. So the last thing we'll actually need is of course a function to check if we've let up off any of these keys to turn off. Let's say we press down the left key and so we'll start giving it force to push the ship to the left, and we also want the particle effect to actually show, and as soon as we lift off the key it should turn off that particle effect and turn off any force being put on it. So the way I'll do this is just use, again, much the same as what we have here. In the input for horizontal, we'll say if it actually equals exactly 0, then we know that no keys in the horizontal direction are being pressed. So changing my comment to checking if no horizontal keys are down. And at this point I'm actually going to get rid of these print commands just since I don't really need them running every single frame. I know that it's working, and you'll find, I found by experience the hard way, if you leave these in there they can actually really slow your game down, so good to get rid of them. Okay, so if horizontal equals 0, and something that might catch people up for the first time, I know it did me, is when you are checking something with an if-then statement or a while or a for, I believe, it always needs to have 2 equal signs, equals equals 0, versus if you're making a statement like something equals 2 or whatnot, or 3. You only use 1 because you're telling it to become that basically, or to equal that. But if you're checking, it always needs to have two equal signs. Of course, this works with if you have greater than or equal to. There'd be both signs there. Less than or equal to, of course. And if it's a direct equal, again, two equal signs. Otherwise, it just won't work. So input to get access horizontal equals 0. No keys are down. In this case, we'd want to turn off any effects. So we'll remember to place that there. And we'll just make a copy of this for the vertical, of course, as well. And change the comment here. Okay, so that's basically it to get the input, just like that. And if you want to see where this input is actually coming from, you can go up to Edit in the main menu, and Project Settings and Input. And then if nothing shows here under Axes, just click the little arrow, of course, to show it. And these are all the axes that come preset up with Unity. You can turn them off simply by turning the size down to 0, or add your own. If I want to, make this 18, now a new one appears, and it's always a copy of the previous one in the list. And you just go through and set the name of it, which is how it's referred to in the script here. The scripted name, I guess, if you need it, and then a negative button to go downward, and then positive button, of course, and various other settings here. So pretty easy to set up any kind of axes or controls if you need to with this. In this case, what we're using is these preset up horizontal and vertical controls. So simply named horizontal and vertical, and they're set up already real nicely for us. Pretty much ready for a key or a mouse button, but mostly I found best just for the arrow keys. So those work out nicely, and that's again where we're getting this horizontal or vertical control from. So I guess we want to actually attach the particle effects to this next, so we can make them animate or emit based on how the player is giving input to the game. So first we'll need to set up some variables to hold these the particle thrusters, or the thruster particles. And setting up a variable in JavaScript is nice and simple. Just type var to say you're about to create a variable here, and then give it a name. So we'll start with, say, the bottom thruster, and then a colon, which means that you're about to tell Unity what this is, and in this case it's a particle emitter. And then we'll do make 4 copies. If you're in this Unisite program, if you have your cursor on the end of a line, you can hit Control-D and make a nice and easy copy of it real quick. Otherwise, of course, just copy-paste it down. So bottom thruster, top thruster, and then a left and a right. So each of those should be VAR for variable, bottom thruster, colon, and then particle emitter. And then top, left, and right. And save that. Make sure everything compiles out okay. If you've got a lot of just stuff, like in this case filling up your console here, you can just hit the clear up on the top left, and it'll get rid of all of it, just so you know for sure that nothing is going wrong in your code. In this case, everything looks good. So now if we look at the ship and over to the player controller component script that's on it here, we've got the thrusters all showing up fine. And you can see a little bit here, it's kind of hard to tell, I guess, if I stretch this over more. So since we declared it as a particle emitter, Unity knows that that's what it is. So if I try to drag in, say, the camera, in this case, it simply won't go. It knows it doesn't belong there. But if I grab the thrusters, we can drag and drop them from the hierarchy right into that. One of the best parts about Unity and what really pulled me to it from trying other attempts at coding and whatnot for games is it's so nice and easy and visual to do all these things. Despite which I've managed to switch up my thrusters. Let's get that correct. Okay, there we go. So yep, just drag and drop each of the parts into there as they go. And now in our code we'll want to set something to actually happen here, of course. So on the horizontal, so if we're getting the right key, we'll of course want to turn the right thruster on. Actually the opposite, I suppose, because the right thruster is on the right. So we need to turn the left the left thruster on when we do that. Let's see, right arrow key. Okay, so in this case we want to say left thruster when we get the right arrow key. And again, since Unity knows this is a particle emitter, we can jump right into the particle emitter options here. So if you click on the thruster in Unity and see we have emit, and as we turn that on and off, it turns on and off just like that. And it's as simple as saying left thruster dot emit, so we're accessing this emit property there, and equals true. And then we'll want to turn that off if we let go of the key. So under the horizontal equals 0 option here, we will do left thruster dot emit equals false. And let's give that a quick check. Make sure everything compiles okay. Alright. And there we go. So when the right key is held down, the left thruster shoots out, so it's pushing it to the right. A little complicated there maybe. And it turns off as soon as I let go of the key. So good to go. We'll just basically copy that code around each of the other sections here. So under this, when you press the left arrow key, we want the right to turn on. And of course we also want to turn that off as soon as we're not holding down any arrow keys. And then the same for vertical, except of course these will be the bottom and top. So when we press the up arrow, the bottom thruster should turn on, and the top thruster on the bottom. I want to make these true, of course. And save that. One last thing we'll need to do is just to be certain, if we press the right arrow key, we want to make sure this one's actually turned off in case we switch somehow so quickly that we never get a 0 for the horizontal input. So I'm going to just make sure that we turn these off at the same time as turning on the opposite. So when I press on the left arrow key, not only does it turn on the right thruster, it makes sure and turns off the left thruster. And the same for the bottom. Just to make sure everything works nicely. Alright. Oops. Ruining my Unity window there. Okay. Let's hit play and make sure that works alright. So pushing to the left, pushing the ship to the right, pushing it up, and pushing it down. Seems to work, and then we're trying multiples at once. We can only use one direction, which is good, so if I can never get the left and the right going at the same time or anything like that. Obviously important. Okay, so there we have again a very nice and simple way to get all the particles set up, and next we're going to get it actually moving around with the physics. Okay, so physics. Let's turn off the play there and select the ship in the hierarchy. And now in case you didn't have it already or removed it like we did previously here, we'll need to add a rigid body component to this so it'll actually be affected by physics and such. So under the component menu, go to physics and then rigid body, and it'll drop right on a rigid body component, and we can get to work on this. A couple quick things here. Since our game is actually only moving, left and right and up and down in the so it's the X, the red, and the Y, the green directions, we can save ourselves some time and trouble by turning on some of these constraints here. In our case, we want to turn on the freeze position on the Z, because we know our ship should never move this way and that, and all the rotations, X, Y, and Z. since it should never rotate either. And that way, when we're applying forces and such, there's no chance of it slowly slipping to the side and starting a spin or moving backwards out of the way, something like that. So just makes things a little easier, and then we don't have to code that in, so it's cleaner code, and I have a pretty good feeling that whatever Unity is doing here is more efficient than how it might be coded if it were in the script. So make sure you turn those on. So again, freeze position in the Z, and freeze all of the rotation options there. And then also for this, we want to turn off gravity, so that way, like if we hit play right now, simply falls out of the sky. We don't want that just for testing. So I'm going to turn off the gravity checkbox. And then just from tweaking and testing for several days in a row and getting this just right, I found that a mass of 3 and drag of about 0.9 seems to work best in this case. Those are things that you can definitely take all the time in the world to tweak and go for, but we'll start working with just that and then maybe change it around a bit if we need to. Just for reference, this is kinematic checkbox here. Make sure that is not turned on in this case. What that'll do is make it so that physics have absolutely zero effect on this object, which is definitely not what we want in this case. Sometimes you do, but not here. So now that we have physics on here, with the rigid body, the gravity turned off, our mass at 3 and drag at 0.9, we'll go back to the script and we'll start actually applying some forces to this. So when we are getting the right arrow key down, we want to move the ship to the right. So of course we're showing the left thruster, and now we just want to apply some forces. And we'll do that again, just like we access the thrusters. We can do the same, except since this is a component directly attached to the ship, which the script is on, we can simply access it directly by saying rigidbody dot do this or do that or whatnot, since it's a component right on there. So we'll just go in script here, rigidbody dot add force, and then we have 3 options in this case, X, Y, and Z. So it's X, Y, Z separated by commas, and here it's just as you see in the sorry, the axes here. The Y, of course, is green going up, X is left and right, and Z is forward and back here. So if we get the horizontal, the right key down, we want to move it this direction, so positive on the X. If we get the left arrow, it should be negative on the X, and the up positive on the Y, and the down negative on the Y. So if we go here and change, so we get the right arrow key, we want to move it to the right, so on the X, we want to give a positive force to it in the X. So we'll try just to start maybe 10, and then we'll do the exact same thing for the left, except make it negative 10, and then something the same for the vertical. So if we get the up arrow key, a positive 10, and if we get the down arrow key, a negative 10. Save that, and make sure everything is working okay. So now we see that's probably a good thing to mess up here. Since my script is obviously wrong and showing an XYZ where there should be nothing, Unity is saying unknown identifier. And here it'll tell you the exact script. So it says assets, scripts, player controller.javascript, and it's at line 20. So it tells me exactly where each of these errors occurred and the problem here. So unknown identifier, Y, Z, etc. In this case, I know exactly what that is. I forgot to take the Y and the Z out of here. They should, of course, each be 0, since we're applying no force on any of those. And then on the vertical controls, this should actually be 0 on the X, 10 on the Y to push it upward, and negative 10 on the Y to push it downward. So 0x, Y depending on up or down, and 0z for any of these. And let's save that. And all errors are gone. Our camera's in a bit of an odd location, so I'm going to move this around just a bit so we can see our ship a bit better here. And now, if all works, we should have some control. So when I push the up, sure enough, there it goes. Left and right. And you can see with that drag, it comes to a halt. The drag over here in the rigid body is controlling, you could say, just how fast it'll come to a halt after moving. And the mass is just how much basically this object weighs. So more mass will take more force to move it, of course, and more drag will make it slow down quicker. So if you have it in play mode, again, another great thing about Unity is you can just sit here and play with these values and change it and test whatever you. So for example, I could change my mass up to 10 and now see that my force barely is able to move this. Or if I set maybe the drag down to 0, once I get this sucker moving, it'll just keep on moving, which would technically be much more realistic for space, but it also makes the game probably a lot more difficult to play. So this is one of those fun things that would be totally up to you depending on how you want this to work. Just a bit of difficulty. Maybe you could even change this in the levels. So if you wanted to, within your script, just change maybe function start if you had a game master that we'll get into in another tutorial, and you want to set your gravity to be a certain amount, or the mass of the player ship, or the drag, all sorts of fun things. You can make various levels more and less difficult. So good thing to check out there. Give it some tweaking and get the exact values that you think you need. One thing to be careful with though is that well, it's good and bad. When you're in play mode, the mass, or sorry, anything you change in here will not stay. So if I change this to 25 and whatever, maybe ridiculous values, and just totally break it, as soon as I turn off play, all my values will revert to what they were before I hit play. So it's good in the sense that if you change a whole bunch of things, you won't break what you have. But bad, just remember that those changes won't stay. So if you make them and you get it just right after hours of tweaking, write it down. Write it down somewhere or put in a notepad or something like that. And then turn off play mode and apply all those changes. So speaking of applying changes, once you have everything ready, make sure you have that ship selected and hit the apply button in the inspector to make sure that all our changes we just made are now applied to the prefab, so that if I delete this and I drag back in the prefab, it has all of that, and it should work just the same, of course. So there we go. So that'll be it for this tutorial. I've got your ship up and moving around, particle effects looking real pretty. And in the next tutorial, we'll be going over actually making a game out of this. So we'll take your levels, put them together with the ship, and we will start making you be able to bounce this thing around the platforms, have collisions and explosions, win and a lose, all that fun stuff. It won't be quite as scripting heavy as this, luckily, if that was any bit of a trouble for anyone. But just remember, if you had any questions with any of that, you can always post them right on the forums, and I'll get to helping you out with that if anything comes up. And of course, one last thing I'd like to look at here. If you are working with any of these and you're wondering how more you could use it or a little better explanation, you can always just select any part of your script if it's built in Unity. If it's just a variable that you created, of course, this won't work, it won't know it. But say input, we want to know what we can do with input.getAxis here. If you select it, and if you're using monodevelop, hold Control and hit the apostrophe key. Or if you're in Unisite here, just click on the little arrow, the little mouse icon with the arrow, and it'll jump you right to the Unity script reference and tell you all sorts of nice things about it. Then you can click on anything here and it'll give you nice examples, tell you exactly how to use it. And this is really the way I learned just about all of JavaScript, to be honest, is simply curiosity, checking out each and every one, and then just moving through all those links and learning it through there. So it's a great way to find out everything you can do with all of these. So I hope that showed, or all of this scripting and setup here showed just how easy and really user-friendly Unity scripting is, and how quickly you can put together a game. So you already have your levels, we have the ship, and we'll be doing a bit more next time. Thanks for watching.